I'd always been drawn to the thrill of traveling alone. There was something about the freedom of being on my own, with no one to answer to but myself, that was incredibly liberating. So when I decided to take a road trip across the country, I knew I'd be going solo. I packed up my car, a trusty old sedan I'd named Bertha, and set off early in the morning. The sun was just starting to rise as I hit the highway, casting a golden glow over the landscape. I felt a sense of excitement and adventure as I settled in for the long drive ahead. As the hours passed, the scenery outside my window changed from bustling cities to rolling hills and finally, to dense forests. I'd been driving for hours, and the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the road. I'd been warned about this stretch of highway, how it could get deserted and spooky at night. But I wasn't one to believe in ghost stories or urban legends. I was a rational person, and I knew that the only thing I had to worry about was the occasional wild animal crossing the road. Or so I thought. As the darkness deepened, I began to feel a creeping sense of unease. It started with little things, like the creaks and groans of Bertha's old engine, or the way the trees seemed to loom over the road like sentinels. But as the miles flew by, the feeling grew stronger. I started to feel like I was being watched, like unblinking eyes were trained on me from the darkness. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself I was just spooked from driving too long. But as I rounded a particularly sharp curve, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure, tall and imposing, standing on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a shadow or a reflection that had taken on a human form. But as I got closer, I realized with a start that it was indeed a person. They were tall and imposing, dressed in a long coat that seemed to billow behind them like a dark cloud. Their face was deathly pale, and their eyes seemed to bore into my very soul. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I passed them by, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't dare look back, fearing what I might see. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just encountered something truly evil. The figure on the road seemed to embody all my deepest fears, and I couldn't help but wonder if I just imagined the whole thing. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I could have sworn I saw the figure standing there, watching me drive away. I pushed the pedal to the floor, eager to put as much distance between myself and the figure as possible. The speedometer climbed higher and higher, but I didn't dare slow down. Not until I saw the lights of a truck stop up ahead. I pulled into the parking lot, my heart still racing with fear. I locked the doors and tried to calm myself down, telling myself I'd just imagined the whole thing. But as I looked around the deserted parking lot, I realized I wasn't alone. There was a figure standing in the shadows, watching me. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me again, but as I looked closer, I realized it was a different figure this time. This one was shorter and stockier, with a baseball cap pulled low over their face. They didn't seem to be paying much attention to me, instead focusing on the truck parked next to them. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking maybe I'd finally found a safe haven. I got out of Bertha and stretched my legs, trying to shake off the lingering fear. The truck stop was dimly lit, with only a few flickering fluorescent lights to illuminate the parking lot. As I walked towards the convenience store, the figure in the baseball cap looked up and caught my eye. For a moment, we just stared at each other, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. Then, they nodded at me and went back to work on their truck. I breathed a sigh of relief and pushed open the door to the convenience store. Inside, the store was warm and welcoming, filled with the smell of coffee and diesel fuel. The clerk behind the counter looked up and smiled as I walked in. "Welcome to Pete's Truck Stop," they said. "What can I get for you?" I smiled back and began to browse the shelves, looking for something to eat and drink. As I wandered the aisles, I noticed something strange. There were no other customers in the store, and the clerk seemed to be watching me with an intensity that made me feel uneasy. As I approached the counter to pay, the clerk's smile faltered for a moment, and they leaned in close. "Listen, I gotta warn you something," they said in a low voice. "This ain't a safe place to be at night." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" The clerk glanced around the store nervously, as if they feared being overheard. "There's been strange happenings around here," they said. "People gone missing, weird noises at night. Some folks say it's haunted. I laughed, thinking it was just small-town superstition. But the clerk's expression was dead serious. "I'm telling you, it's not safe," they said. "You should get back on the road, keep driving, till you reach the next town." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I considered the clerk's words. Was it just paranoia, or was there really something sinister lurking in the shadows? As I left the store and walked back to Bertha, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. The figure in the baseball cap was gone, but their truck was still parked in the same spot. And on the side of the truck, someone had scrawled a message in red letters, "Turn back now." I felt a chill run down my spine as I stared at the message on the side of the truck. Who could have written it, and what did they mean? I looked around the parking lot, but there was no one in sight. The clerk was back inside the store, and the figure in the baseball cap was nowhere to be seen. I took a deep breath and tried to shake off the feeling of unease. I told myself it was just a prank, someone trying to scare me. But as I got back into Bertha and started the engine, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. I must have imagined it, I told myself. As I pulled out of the parking lot and back onto the highway, I noticed something strange. The GPS on my phone was taking me on a detour, down a dark and winding road that seemed to lead deeper into the woods. I tried to reroute, but the GPS insisted that this was the fastest way to my destination. I began to feel a sense of unease, as if I was being herded towards some unknown fate. And then, I saw it. A sign on the side of the road, reading, "Welcome to Raven's Peak." As I drove into Raven's Peak, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The town was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from a few flickering streetlights. I drove down the main street, looking for a place to stop and ask for directions. But the town seemed deserted, the buildings all boarded up and abandoned. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise, like the sound of whispers on the wind. I spun around, trying to see who or what was making the noise, but there was no one there. I got out of Bertha and walked into the nearest building, an old diner that looked like it hadn't been open in years. Inside, I found a note scrawled on the wall, "Turn back now, while you still can." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was not alone in Raven's Peak. Someone or something was watching me, waiting for me to make my next move. I knew I had to get out of there, but as I turned to leave, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. And then, I saw it. A figure standing in the shadows, watching me. The figure didn't move or speak. It just stood there, its eyes fixed on me with an unspeakable malevolence. I tried to run, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. The figure began to descend the stairs, its movement slow and deliberate. As it reached the bottom step, I saw its face. It was twisted, corrupted, with eyes that glowed like embers from the depths of hell. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. The figure reached out a bony hand and touched my face. Everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. The figure was nowhere to be seen. But as I stumbled to my feet, I realized that I was not alone. The mansion was filled with whispers, echoes of the damned. And then, I saw it. A door hidden behind a tapestry. The door was open, beckoning me to enter. I stepped through the doorway, and into a realm of unspeakable horror. The room was filled with ancient artifacts, relics of a dark and sinister cult. I saw ritualistic symbols etched into the walls, pulsing with a malevolent energy. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. The room fell silent. And then, I heard my own voice whisper, "Welcome home." As I sat at the truck stop, I noticed a stranger sitting in the corner, sipping a cup of coffee. He was dressed in a long, black coat, and his face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. At first, I thought nothing of him, assuming he was just another tired traveler. But as I glanced over at him, I caught him staring at me with an intense gaze. I felt a shiver run down my spine as he got up and walked over to me. "You're the one who's been driving through Raven's Peak, aren't you?" he asked in a low, gravelly voice. I nodded, feeling a sense of unease. "What did you see there?" he asked, his eyes glinting with a knowing light. I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. But there was something about the stranger that made me trust him. "I saw a figure in the shadows," I said, "and I found a message scrawled on the wall." The stranger nodded, his expression grim. "You're lucky to have gotten out of there alive," he said. "Raven's Peak is a place of darkness, where the living are not welcome." I felt a chill run down my spine as the stranger's words echoed in my mind. "What do you mean?" I asked. The stranger leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "Raven's Peak is a place where the veil between worlds is thin," he said, "where the living and the dead can cross over." I felt my blood run cold as I realized the truth. The stranger's words hung in the air, sending a shiver down my spine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What do you mean, the veil between worlds?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The stranger leaned in closer, his eyes glinting with a knowing light. "Raven's Peak is a place where the living and the dead can cross over," he repeated, "where the boundaries between worlds are thin." I felt my mind reeling as I tried to process what I was being told. "But what does that mean?" I asked. The stranger's expression was grim. "It means that Raven's Peak is a place of great danger," he said, "where the living can be trapped between worlds, forever stuck in a place of darkness and shadow." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the truth. I had been to Raven's Peak, and I had seen things that couldn't be explained. I knew then that I had to get as far away from Raven's Peak as possible. But as I turned to leave, I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Wait," the stranger said. "You can't just leave. You have to know the truth." I turned to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What truth?" I asked. The stranger's expression was grim. "The truth about Raven's Peak," he said, "and the truth about yourself." The stranger's words hung in the air, leaving me with a sense of trepidation. "What do you mean, the truth about myself?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The stranger's expression was somber. "You have a connection to Raven's Peak," he said. "A connection that goes beyond just a simple visit." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I tried to process what I was being told. "What kind of connection?" I asked. The stranger hesitated, as if unsure of how to reveal the truth. "You have family ties to Raven's Peak," he said finally. "Ties that go back generations." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. The stranger pulled out a small, leather-bound book. "This is a history of Raven's Peak," he said, "and it contains a family tree that will reveal the truth about your connection to the town." I took the book, feeling a sense of trepidation. As I opened the book and began to read, I realized that my life was about to change forever. As I read through the book, I discovered that my family had a dark and troubled history with Raven's Peak. My ancestors had lived in the town, and had been involved in some kind of sinister activities. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read about the strange rituals and ceremonies that my family had participated in. It seemed that they had been involved in some kind of occult practices, and had made a pact with a malevolent force. As I turned the pages, I came across a passage that made my blood run cold. The family's involvement with the dark arts came at a terrible cost. Many family members were consumed by the very evil they had sought to control, and were never seen again. I felt like I had stumbled into a nightmare. I couldn't believe that my family had been involved in such sinister activities. But as I read on, I realized that the truth was even more shocking. My family's involvement with the dark arts was not just a relic of the past. It was still going on, and I was a part of it. As I read the final pages of the book, I felt like I was staring into the abyss. My family's dark legacy stretched out before me like a twisted, nightmarish landscape. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My family's involvement with the dark arts was not just a distant memory, but a living, breathing thing that still pulsed with malevolent energy. And I was a part of it. I felt like I was trapped in a living hell, with no escape from the darkness that had consumed my family for generations. As I closed the book, I knew that I had to get out of there. I had to leave Raven's Peak and its dark legacy behind. But as I stood up to leave, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was the stranger, his eyes glinting with a knowing light. "You can't escape the darkness that easily," he said. "It's a part of you now." I tried to shake off his hand, but he held tight. "You have to face the darkness head on," he said. You have to confront the evil that has consumed your family. I knew that he was right. I had to face the darkness, no matter how terrifying it was. The stranger led me back to Raven's Peak, to the very heart of the darkness that had consumed my family. We walked in silence, the only sound the creaking of trees and the rustling of leaves. As we approached the town, I could feel the darkness growing thicker, like a palpable fog. I knew that I was walking into the very depths of hell. The stranger stopped in front of an old, dilapidated mansion, its windows boarded up and its door hanging crookedly on its hinges. "This is the heart of the darkness," he said. "This is where your family's legacy of evil began." I steeled myself and pushed open the creaking door. The interior of the mansion was dark and musty, the air thick with the scent of decay. As I walked deeper into the mansion, I began to feel a presence around me, a malevolent force that seemed to be watching my every move. Suddenly, I heard a voice, low and menacing. "Welcome to my home," it said. I spun around, trying to see who was speaking, but there was no one in sight. "Who are you?" I demanded. The voice laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "I am the darkness that has consumed your family," it said, "and I have been waiting for you." I knew then that I was face to face with the source of the evil that had haunted my family for generations. The voice seemed to come from all around me, echoing off the walls of the mansion. I spun around, trying to locate the source, but there was no one in sight. "Who are you?" I demanded again. The voice laughed again, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "I am the one who has been awakened by your family's dark rituals," it said. "I am the one who has been feeding on their evil for generations." I felt a surge of anger and determination. I knew that I had to confront this evil head-on. "What do you want from me?" I asked. The voice seemed to grow louder, more menacing. "I want your soul," it said. "I want to add you to my collection of trapped spirits." I knew that I had to act fast. I remembered the words of the stranger, about facing the darkness head-on. I took a deep breath and began to walk forward, into the heart of the mansion. As I walked, the voice grew louder, more urgent. But I didn't look back. I kept my eyes fixed on the door at the end of the hall. I knew that I was walking into the very depths of hell, but I was determined to face whatever evil lay within. As I reached the door at the end of the hall, I felt a sense of trepidation. I knew that whatever lay beyond this door was the source of the evil that had haunted my family for generations. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Beyond it lay a room that was shrouded in darkness. The air was thick with the scent of decay and corruption. As I stepped into the room, I felt a presence around me. It was a cold, malevolent force that seemed to be watching my every move. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed like embers from hell. "Welcome," it said in a voice that was like a rusty gate. "I have been waiting for you." I tried to speak, but my voice was frozen in my throat. I was paralyzed with fear. The figure began to move closer, its eyes fixed on me with an unspeakable hunger. I knew that I was staring into the face of pure evil, and I knew that I was doomed. But then, something unexpected happened. The figure stopped in its tracks, its eyes fixed on something behind me. I turned to see what it was, and that was when I saw the stranger standing in the doorway, a look of fierce determination on his face. "I don't think so," he said, his voice firm and commanding. The figure let out a scream of rage and began to move towards the stranger. But he stood his ground, his eyes flashing with a fierce inner light. I knew then that the stranger was not what he seemed. He was something more, something powerful, and I knew that I was not alone in this fight. The stranger stood tall, his eyes flashing with a fierce inner light. The figure let out a scream of rage and began to move towards him, but he didn't flinch. As the figure approached, the stranger raised his hand, and a blast of energy shot out, sending the figure flying across the room. I stared in shock, unsure of what I had just seen. The stranger turned to me, his eyes still flashing with energy. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth earlier," he said. "But I had to protect you." "Protect me from what?" I asked. The stranger hesitated, as if unsure of how much to reveal. "I'm not just a stranger," he said. "I'm a guardian of the veil between worlds." I stared at him, trying to process what he was telling me. "What do you mean?" I asked. The stranger took a deep breath. "The veil between worlds is thinning," he said, "and creatures from the other side are crossing over." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What creatures?" I asked. The stranger's expression was grim. "Creatures of darkness," he said. "Creatures that feed on human souls." I knew then that I was in grave danger. But the stranger's next words surprised me. "You're not just a victim," he said. "You're a key player in this battle." I stared at him, unsure of what he meant. "What do you mean?" I asked. The stranger's eyes locked onto mine. "You have a special gift," he said. "A gift that could tip the balance in this battle." I felt a surge of excitement mixed with fear. "What gift?" I asked. The stranger's smile was enigmatic. "That's for you to discover," he said. I stared at the stranger, my mind racing with questions. What gift could I possibly have that would make a difference in this battle? The stranger smiled, as if he knew what I was thinking. "Come with me," he said, turning to leave the room. I followed him, my heart pounding with anticipation. We walked through the winding corridors of the mansion, finally stopping at a door that I hadn't noticed before. The stranger pushed open the door, revealing a room filled with strange and exotic objects. There were crystals and talismans, ancient-looking books, and mysterious artifacts. The stranger walked over to a pedestal in the center of the room, where a small, leather-bound book lay open. "This is the journal of your ancestor," he said, his voice low and serious. "The one who made the pact with the darkness." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I approached the pedestal. As I looked at the journal, I saw that the pages were filled with strange symbols and diagrams. But as I touched the page, the symbols began to glow, and I felt a surge of energy run through my body. Suddenly, I could see visions of the past and present, all swirling together in a mad dance. I saw my ancestors, making their pact with the darkness. I saw the creatures of the night, feeding on human souls. And I saw myself, standing at the center of it all, with the power to change the course of events. The stranger's voice brought me back to the present. "You have the gift of sight," he said. "The ability to see beyond the veil." I stared at him, my mind reeling with the implications. What did it mean, to have the gift of sight? And how could I use it to stop the darkness? I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The gift of sight? It sounded like a curse. What does it mean? I asked the stranger, trying to process the weight of his words. The stranger's expression was serious. "It means you can see beyond the veil," he repeated. "You can see the creatures of the night, the ones that hide in the shadows." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And what am I supposed to do with this gift?" I asked. The stranger's eyes locked onto mine. "You're supposed to use it to stop the darkness," he said. "You're the only one who can." I felt like I had been handed a burden I couldn't carry. "But how?" I asked, feeling a sense of desperation. The stranger smiled, a small, enigmatic smile. "You'll figure it out," he said. "You have the gift of sight. Trust it." I nodded, trying to muster up some courage. But as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure, standing in the shadows, watching me. I spun around, but the figure was gone. The stranger's voice was low and serious. "They're coming for you," he said. "You have to be ready." I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but it only seemed to intensify as the day wore on. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained on me from the shadows. The stranger seemed to sense my unease, and he placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You're safe for now," he said, "but you have to be careful. The creatures of the night are closing in." I nodded, trying to muster up some courage. "What can I do to protect myself?" I asked. The stranger smiled, a small, enigmatic smile. "You have the gift of sight," he said. "Trust it. It will guide you." I nodded, trying to trust in the gift that I had been given. But as I walked away from the stranger, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a nightmare. The shadows seemed to deepen and lengthen around me, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to move of their own accord. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. But no matter how fast I walked, the shadows seemed to keep pace with me, closing in on me like a living, breathing entity. Suddenly, the shadows seemed to coalesce into a solid mass, a living, breathing entity that surrounded me on all sides. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. The darkness began to close in on me, a suffocating, crushing weight that threatened to consume me whole. I felt myself being pulled down into the depths of the earth, down into the very heart of madness. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went black. I don't know how long I was out. When I came to, I was lying on the ground, my head throbbing with pain. The stranger was standing over me, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded, trying to sit up. "What happened?" I asked. The stranger's expression was grim. "The creatures of the night attacked you," he said, "but I was able to fend them off." I looked around, trying to take in my surroundings. We were in a small, dimly lit room. The walls were made of cold, gray stone, and the air was thick with the scent of dampness. "Where are we?" I asked. The stranger's eyes seemed to cloud over. "We're in a place where the veil between worlds is thin," he said. "A place where the creatures of the night roam free." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do we do now?" I asked. The stranger's expression was determined. "We find a way to stop the creatures of the night," he said, "once and for all." The stranger's eyes seemed to bore into my soul as he spoke. "We need to gather allies," he said. "People who possess the gift of sight, like you." I nodded, trying to process the enormity of what he was proposing. "But how do we find them?" I asked. The stranger smiled, a small, enigmatic smile. "I have a few contacts," he said. "People who can help us track down those with the gift." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Who are these contacts?" I asked. The stranger's expression turned serious. "People who have dedicated their lives to fighting the creatures of the night," he said. "People who possess knowledge and power beyond your wildest dreams." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I contemplated the stranger's words. "What's the plan?" I asked. The stranger's eyes seemed to gleam with determination. "We gather our allies, and then we launch a final attack on the creatures of the night," he said. "We take back the night, and we restore the balance between worlds." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "I'm in," I said. The stranger smiled, a fierce glint in his eye. "Then let's get started," he said. The stranger and I set out on our mission to gather allies, traveling to hidden corners of the world where people with the gift of sight were rumored to reside. Our first stop was a small, secluded monastery nestled in the mountains. The monks who lived there were said to possess ancient knowledge and powerful abilities. As we approached the monastery, I could feel a strange energy emanating from within. The air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly power. The stranger nodded, as if he sensed it too. "This is the place," he said. We entered the monastery, and were greeted by the abbot, a wise and kind-eyed old man. "Welcome, travelers," he said. "We have been expecting you." I was taken aback. "Expecting us?" I repeated. The abbot nodded. "We have been watching you from afar," he said. "We know of your quest to defeat the creatures of the night." I felt a surge of hope. "Will you help us?" I asked. The abbot nodded. "We will do what we can," he said. "But first, you must prove yourselves worthy." The abbot led us to a large, dimly lit chamber deep within the monastery. The room was filled with a thick, fog-like mist that seemed to swirl and eddy around us. "This is the trial," the abbot said, his voice low and mysterious. "Here, you will face your deepest fears and prove your worth." I felt a shiver run down my spine as the abbot handed me a small, ornate box. "Solve the riddle of the box," he said, "and you will be granted the monk's aid." I took the box, feeling a strange energy emanating from it. The box was small, no larger than a jewelry box, and was adorned with intricate carvings and symbols. I turned the box over in my hands, searching for a hidden catch or mechanism. But there was nothing. I looked up at the stranger, who was watching me with an intense gaze. "What's the riddle?" I asked him. He shook his head. "I don't know," he said, "but I think it's connected to your past." I felt a surge of frustration. "My past?" I repeated. The stranger nodded. "Think about your childhood," he said. "Think about the memories you've suppressed." I closed my eyes, focusing on my memories. And then, suddenly, it came to me. The memory of a music box. A music box that my mother used to play for me when I was a child. I opened my eyes, a look of excitement on my face. I remember, I said. The stranger smiled. Open the box, he said. I lifted the lid, and a soft, melancholy tune filled the air. The mist in the room began to clear, revealing a hidden door. The abbot nodded, a look of approval on his face. Well done, he said. You have passed the trial. The abbot led us through the hidden door, which opened into a narrow, winding stairway. We descended deep into the earth, the air growing colder and damper with each step. Finally, we reached a small, dimly lit chamber. The room was filled with rows of ancient, dusty bookshelves, stretching all the way to the vaulted ceiling. The abbot nodded, a look of pride on his face. This is our library, he said. Here, you will find the knowledge you need to defeat the creatures of the night. I stared in awe, my eyes scanning the shelves. There were books bound in black leather, adorned with strange symbols and markings. There were ancient tomes, yellowed with age, and mysterious scrolls, tied with faded ribbons. The stranger began to browse the shelves, his eyes scanning the titles. I joined him, searching for any book that might hold the key to our quest. As we searched, I stumbled upon an ancient tome bound in black leather. The cover was adorned with strange symbols, and the pages were yellowed with age. I opened the book, and a musty smell wafted up. The pages were filled with ancient text, written in a language I couldn't understand. But as I touched the page, the text began to glow, and I felt a surge of energy run through my body. Suddenly, I could understand the language. The text was revealing a powerful spell, one that could banish the creatures of the night back to their own realm. I looked up at the stranger, excitement on my face. I found it, I said. I found the spell. The stranger's eyes locked onto mine, a look of hope and determination. Then let's get to work, he said. We spent the next few hours studying the spell, poring over the ancient text and practicing the intricate gestures and incantations. As we worked, I could feel the power of the spell growing within me. It was a strange, tingling sensation, like electricity building in my veins. Finally, we were ready. We stood facing each other, our eyes locked in a fierce gaze. Are you ready? The stranger asked, his voice low and steady. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. Together, we began to chant the words of the spell, our voices rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. The air around us began to shimmer and glow, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. And then, in an instant, it was done. The spell was cast, and a blast of energy shot out from our outstretched hands. The creatures of the night let out a collective scream of rage and pain as they were banished back to their own realm. The darkness receded, and the moon broke through the clouds, casting a silver glow over the landscape. I felt a sense of exhilaration and relief wash over me. We had done it. We had saved the world from the forces of darkness. But as I turned to the stranger, I saw a look of sadness on his face. What's wrong? I asked. The stranger's eyes locked onto mine. The spell came at a cost, he said. A cost that I must pay. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean? I asked. The stranger's smile was faint. I am the last of my kind, he said. And with the spell cast, I am no more. I stared at the stranger in horror as his words sunk in. He was the last of his kind, and the spell had taken his life. No, I whispered, feeling a wave of grief wash over me. You can't die. Not after everything we've been through. The stranger's smile was faint, but his eyes shone with a deep warmth. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You've come so far. You've saved the world. I felt a lump form in my throat as I realized that I would never see my friend again. What can I do? I asked, feeling helpless. The stranger's eyes locked onto mine. Remember me, he said. Remember the sacrifices that were made to save the world. And with that, he was gone. I stood there, frozen in shock, as the stranger's body disappeared into nothingness. I felt a wave of grief wash over me, but I knew that I couldn't give in to it. I had to keep moving forward. I took a deep breath and looked around, taking in the desolate landscape. The creatures of the night were gone, banished back to their own realm. But I knew that there would be more battles to fight, more challenges to overcome. I steeled myself and began to walk, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As I walked, the landscape around me began to change. The darkness receded, and the stars shone brightly in the sky. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. I felt a sense of hope and renewal wash over me. The world was starting anew, and I was a part of it. After a while, I came to a small village, nestled in a green valley. The villagers were going about their daily business, smiling and laughing with each other. I felt a sense of belonging wash over me. This was where I was meant to be. I approached one of the villagers, an old man with a kind face. "Welcome, traveler," he said, smiling. "We've been expecting you." I was taken aback. "Expecting me?" I repeated. The old man nodded. "Yes," he said. "We've been waiting for the one who would bring the light back to our world." I felt a sense of wonder wash over me. "I'm just an ordinary person," I said. The old man smiled. "You're not ordinary," he said. "You're the hero who saved our world." I felt a sense of pride and purpose wash over me. "What do I do now?" I asked. The old man's eyes twinkled. "Now," he said, "you help us rebuild our world." I smiled, feeling a sense of excitement and anticipation. "I'm ready," I said. And with that, I began my new journey, helping to rebuild a world filled with hope and possibility. The haunted mansion. As I stepped out of the car and onto the crumbling driveway, a shiver ran down my spine. The mansion loomed before me, its towering spires and turrets reaching towards the sky like skeletal fingers. My name is Emily, and I'd inherited this monstrosity from a distant relative I'd never met. The lawyer's letter had been cryptic, but the promise of a vast inheritance had been too enticing to resist. As I approached the mansion, I noticed something odd. The windows were all boarded up, and the front door was covered in cobwebs. It looked as though no one had lived here for decades. I pushed open the creaking front door and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the stench of decay. I coughed, covering my mouth with my sleeve. As I looked around, I saw that the interior was just as neglected as the exterior. Furniture was shrouded in dust sheets, and the walls were adorned with faded portraits. But it was the staircase that caught my attention. It curved upwards like a ghostly ribbon, vanishing into the darkness above. I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. Something was watching me. As I stood there, frozen in fear, I heard a faint whispering in my ear. It was a soft, raspy voice, and it seemed to be coming from all around me. "Welcome home, Emily," the voice whispered. I spun around, trying to see who was speaking, but there was no one there. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. "Get out while you still can." I knew then that I had to explore the mansion, to uncover its secrets. I took a deep breath and began to climb the stairs. The whispering grew fainter as I ascended, but I could feel eyes upon me, watching me. I reached the top of the stairs and saw a long, dark corridor stretching out before me. I fumbled in my pocket for a flashlight and turned it on. The beam of light illuminated the corridor, revealing cobweb-shrouded portraits and dusty candelabras. As I walked down the corridor, I noticed that the doors to the rooms were all slightly ajar. I pushed open the first door and saw a bedroom, the bed covered in a thick layer of dust. But it was the next room that made my blood run cold. It was a nursery, filled with antique toys and a beautiful, ornate crib. And on the wall, in letters scrawled in red crayon, "They're waiting for you." As I stood there, frozen in fear, I heard a faint creaking sound. It was soft at first, but grew louder and more insistent. I turned to face the staircase, my heart pounding in my chest. The creaking grew louder still, and I could feel the vibrations of footsteps through the floorboards. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness above. It was a woman, tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. She began to descend the stairs, her movements slow and deliberate. I tried to step back, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she stopped and regarded me with a cold, calculating gaze. "Welcome to Ravenswood Manor," she said, her voice low and husky. "I've been waiting for you." I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The woman's eyes seemed to be hypnotizing me, drawing me in with an otherworldly power. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on a dusty old bed, my head throbbing with pain. The woman was nowhere to be seen, but I could sense her presence still, watching me from the shadows. I knew then that I had to get out of Ravenswood Manor, to escape the clutches of the mysterious woman and the dark forces that lurked within these walls. But as I stumbled out of the bedroom, I realized that I was lost in a labyrinth of corridors and chambers. The mansion seemed to stretch on forever, its secrets and terrors waiting to be uncovered. As I wandered through the mansion, I stumbled upon a door that seemed out of place. It was hidden behind a tattered tapestry, and it looked like it hadn't been opened in years. I pushed the door open, and a musty smell wafted out. Inside, I found a room filled with ancient artifacts and dusty old books. But what caught my attention was a large, leather-bound diary. It was locked, but I managed to pick the lock after a few minutes of fiddling with it. As I opened the diary, I saw that it belonged to Malcolm Ravenswood, the former owner of the mansion. The entries were cryptic, but they seemed to hint at a dark family secret. I read on, my heart racing with anticipation. The entries grew more and more disturbing, until I finally stumbled upon the truth. Malcolm Ravenswood had made a pact with a malevolent entity, trading his family's souls for wealth and power. The entity had demanded a terrible price, and the Ravenswood family had been cursed ever since. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was trapped in the mansion, surrounded by the vengeful spirits of the Ravenswood family. And then, I heard a faint whispering in my ear. "You shouldn't have come here." I spun around, trying to see who was whispering in my ear, but there was no one there. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. I felt a presence closing in around me, suffocating me. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. I was plunged into darkness, surrounded by the oppressive silence of the mansion. I stumbled forward, desperate to find a way out, but every door I opened led only to more corridors, more rooms. I was trapped. And then, I saw a faint light in the distance. It was a candle, flickering in the darkness. I stumbled towards it, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the candle, I saw that it was sitting on a small, ornate table. And on the table, there was a note. It was addressed to me. "Dear Emily," it read. "I've been waiting for you. You'll never leave this place." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was trapped in the mansion, at the mercy of the malevolent entity that haunted it. And then, I heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, coming from the floor above. The footsteps grew louder, heavier, and I could feel the vibrations of each step through the floorboards. I knew that I had to get out of there, but my legs felt like lead. Suddenly, the candle on the table flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. I was trapped, alone and defenseless in the haunted mansion. And then, I saw a faint light in the distance. It was a figure, standing at the top of the stairs. The figure began to move towards me, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable horror. As the figure drew closer, I saw that it was Malcolm Ravenswood, the former owner of the mansion. His eyes were black as coal, and his skin was deathly pale. "Welcome to my home," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You'll never leave." I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. Malcolm reached out a bony hand and grasped my wrist, pulling me towards him. As I stumbled forward, I saw that we were standing in front of a large, ornate mirror. Malcolm's eyes seemed to be burning with an otherworldly intensity as he pulled me closer to the mirror. And then, I saw my own reflection staring back at me, but it was distorted, twisted into a grotesque parody of my own face. Malcolm's grip tightened on my wrist, and I felt a searing pain as he pulled me into the mirror. As I was pulled into the mirror, I felt a strange sensation, like I was being sucked into a vortex. The world around me began to distort and blur, and I felt myself being stretched and compressed. When I finally emerged on the other side, I found myself in a strange, surreal world. The sky was a deep, bloody red, and the trees were twisted and gnarled. Malcolm Ravenswood was standing beside me, his eyes still burning with an otherworldly intensity. "Welcome to my world," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You'll never escape." As we walked through the twisted landscape, I saw all manner of horrors. Grotesque creatures lurched through the shadows, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. I knew then that I was trapped in a living nightmare, and that Malcolm Ravenswood was my guide and tormentor. But I refused to give up. I knew that I had to find a way out of this twisted world, no matter what horrors lay ahead. And then, I saw it. A glimmer of light in the distance, a beacon of hope in the darkness. "Malcolm," I said, my voice firm and resolute. "I'm not going to play your game. I'm going to escape." Malcolm's eyes flashed with anger, and he reached out to grab me. But I was too quick. I dodged his grasp and made a run for the light. As I emerged from the twisted landscape, I found myself back in the mansion. But something was different. The walls seemed to be shifting and twisting, and the air was thick with an eerie, pulsating energy. As I stumbled through the mansion, I realized that I was completely disoriented. The rooms seemed to be shifting and changing around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being herded towards some unknown fate. I stumbled upon a door that I was certain hadn't been there before. It was old and worn, with heavy iron hinges and a large, rusty doorknob. I turned the doorknob and pushed the door open, revealing a narrow stairway that descended deep into the earth. The air that wafted up from the depths was cold and damp, and I could hear the sound of dripping water echoing up the stairs. I knew that I had to be careful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn towards something. I began to make my way down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I descended deeper into the earth, the air grew colder and the darkness seemed to press in around me. I stumbled and almost fell, but managed to catch myself just in time. Finally, I reached the bottom of the stairs and found myself in a small, damp chamber. The walls were made of cold, gray stone, and the air was heavy with the scent of mold and decay. And then, I saw it. A large, ornate box sat in the center of the room, adorned with strange symbols and markings. The box seemed to be pulsing with a malevolent energy, and I knew that I had to be careful. Suddenly, I heard a faint whispering in my ear. "Open the box," it said. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. The whispering in my ear grew louder, more insistent. "Open the box," it repeated. I knew that I shouldn't give in to the voice, but a part of me was curious. What could be inside the box? I reached out a trembling hand and touched the lid. It was cold to the touch, and seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. As I lifted the lid, a musty smell wafted out. I peered inside, and saw that the box was filled with a dark, misty substance. The whispering in my ear grew louder still, urging me to reach inside the box. I hesitated, unsure of what to do, but my curiosity got the better of me. I reached inside the box, and felt a chill run down my spine. As I touched the misty substance, I felt a sudden jolt of electricity. The room around me began to spin, and I felt myself being pulled towards the box. I tried to pull my hand back, but it was too late. The misty substance seemed to be pulling me in, drawing me into the box. I felt myself being sucked into a vortex, a swirling tunnel of darkness. I tried to scream, but my voice was muffled and distant. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I found myself back in the foyer of the mansion. But something was different. The room seemed to be distorted, as if it was reflected in a funhouse mirror. I stumbled forward, trying to get my bearings, but every step I took seemed to lead me in circles. I was trapped in a never-ending loop, reliving the same moments over and over. And then, I saw her. The woman in black, standing at the top of the stairs. She beckoned to me, her eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. I tried to run, but my legs were heavy, unresponsive. I was trapped, unable to move or escape. The woman began to descend the stairs, her eyes fixed on me. I could feel her presence, cold and malignant, spreading through the room like a stain. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she spoke in a voice that was like a rusty gate. "You should not have come here," she said. And with that, the room went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. The mansion was silent, the only sound the creaking of the old wooden beams. I stumbled to my feet, determined to escape. But as I reached the front door, I found that it was locked. The key was gone. I was trapped. And then, I heard the whispering. A soft, raspy voice that seemed to be coming from all around me. "You'll never leave," it said. I spun around, trying to locate the source of the whispering. But there was no one in sight. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. "You'll never leave," it repeated. I knew then that I had to find a way out of the mansion, no matter what. I began to search the rooms, looking for a door or a window that I could use to escape. But every door I opened led only to more rooms, more corridors. I was trapped in a maze, with no way out. And then, I saw it. A small, hidden door that blended seamlessly into the wall. I hadn't noticed it before. I pushed the door open, and a musty smell wafted out. I stepped through the doorway, and found myself in a narrow, dimly lit corridor. The corridor stretched out before me, disappearing into the darkness. I knew that I had to follow it, no matter where it led. As I walked, the corridor began to slope downward, leading me deeper into the earth. I could feel the weight of the mansion above me, pressing down on my shoulders. And then, I heard the sound of dripping water. It was a faint, echoing sound, but it seemed to be getting louder. I rounded a corner, and saw a faint light in the distance. It was a small, flickering flame, casting eerie shadows on the walls. As I approached the flame, I saw that it was coming from a small, ornate lantern. The lantern was sitting on a pedestal, surrounded by a halo of light. And then, I saw the words. They were etched into the wall, in letters that seemed to be made of blood. "Welcome to your grave," they read. I stumbled backward, shocked and confused. The figure standing in front of me was identical to me, with the same face, the same hair, the same clothes. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear. Malcolm Ravenswood stepped forward, a sly smile spreading across his face. "You're trapped in a loop," he said. "A never-ending cycle of fear and terror." I looked around the room, trying to make sense of what was happening. But everything seemed distorted, twisted. The figure in front of me began to speak, its voice identical to mine. "You'll never escape," it said. "You'll be trapped here forever." I tried to scream, but my voice was muffled and distant. The room began to spin around me, and I felt myself being pulled towards the figure. As I got closer, I saw that its eyes were black as coal, and its skin was deathly pale. I was staring into the face of my own terror. When I came to, I was lying on the porch, my head throbbing with pain. The figure was nowhere to be seen, but I could sense its presence still, watching me from the shadows. I stumbled to my feet, my heart racing with fear. I had to get out of there, had to escape from the endless night. I staggered back into the house, slamming the door shut behind me. I locked it, bolted it, and leaned against it to catch my breath. But as I looked around the room, I realized that something was off. The furniture seemed to be shifted, the shadows cast in strange and ominous ways. And then, I saw it. A message, scrawled on the wall in blood-red letters. "I'll always be watching." I spun around, but there was no one there. The message seemed to be staring at me, mocking me. I knew then that I had to get out of there, had to escape from the house and the endless night. I grabbed my keys and made a run for the door. But as I reached for the handle, I felt a cold, clammy hand on my shoulder. I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, but it only seemed to intensify. I could feel eyes upon me, boring into my skin. I knew then that I had to escape, no matter what. I began to search the room more frantically, looking for any possible means of escape. As I searched, I stumbled upon a small, hidden compartment in the wall. Inside, I found a key. I grabbed the key and rushed to the door, unlocking it with shaking hands. As I pulled the door open, I felt a rush of cool air, and I saw a sliver of light in the distance. I knew then that I was close to freedom. I took a deep breath and stepped out into the unknown. As I emerged from the room, I found myself in a long, dark corridor. The walls seemed to stretch on forever, and I could feel the weight of the mansion bearing down upon me. But I didn't let that stop me. I began to run, my footsteps echoing off the walls. I could feel the key clutched in my hand, and I knew that I was one step closer to freedom. As I ran, the corridor seemed to grow longer and darker. I could feel the shadows closing in around me, and I knew that I was not alone. And then, I saw it. A figure, standing in the distance, watching me. As I ran towards the figure, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I was terrified, but I knew I had to keep moving. As I got closer, I saw that it was Malcolm Ravenswood. He was standing in front of a large, wooden door, and he was smiling at me. "Welcome," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "I've been waiting for you." I tried to run past him, but he was too quick. He grabbed me, holding me in a tight grip. "You'll never leave this place," he hissed, his breath cold against my ear. I struggled and kicked, but he was too strong. He dragged me back into the depths of the mansion, deeper into the darkness. As we walked, the walls seemed to close in around me. I could feel the weight of the mansion bearing down upon me, crushing me. And then, I saw it. A door, hidden behind a tapestry. Malcolm pushed me through the door, and I found myself back in the foyer. But something was different. The room was changed, twisted. The walls were distorted, and the furniture was rearranged. I stumbled forward, confused and disoriented. And then, I saw it. A figure, standing in the center of the room. It was me. I stumbled backward, shocked and confused. The figure standing in front of me was identical to me, with the same face, the same hair, the same clothes. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear. Malcolm Ravenswood stepped forward, a sly smile spreading across his face. "You're trapped in a loop," he said. "A never-ending cycle of fear and terror." I looked around the room, trying to make sense of what was happening. But everything seemed distorted, twisted. The figure in front of me began to speak, its voice identical to mine. "You'll never escape," it said. "You'll be trapped here forever." I tried to scream, but my voice was muffled and distant. The room began to spin around me, and I felt myself being pulled towards the figure. As I got closer, I saw that its eyes were black as coal, and its skin was deathly pale. I was staring into the face of my own terror. I was consumed by a sense of dread as I stared into the face of my doppelganger. Its eyes seemed to bore into my soul, and I could feel its icy breath on my skin. Suddenly, the room was filled with a blinding flash of light. I stumbled backward, shielding my eyes. When the light faded, I saw that the doppelganger was gone. But Malcolm Ravenswood was still standing in front of me, his eyes gleaming with malevolence. "You'll never escape," he repeated, his voice dripping with malice. I knew then that I had to think fast. I remembered the key that I had found earlier, and I realized that it might be the only way to escape. I reached into my pocket and grasped the key tightly. I knew that I had to find the right door to unlock. Malcolm Ravenswood began to laugh, a cold, mirthless sound. "You'll never find the right door," he sneered. But I was determined. I began to search the room, looking for any door that might lead to freedom. As I searched, I stumbled upon a small, hidden door. It was locked, but I knew that I had the key. I inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a set of stairs that led up to the sunlight. I took a deep breath and began to climb the stairs. I knew that I was taking a risk, but I had to try. As I emerged into the sunlight, I felt a sense of freedom that I had never felt before. I knew that I had escaped the haunted mansion, and that I would never go back. But as I looked back at the mansion, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Malcolm Ravenswood was standing in the window, his eyes fixed on me with a malevolent glare. I knew then that I would never be free from the haunted mansion. The end.